At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Leading Britain's conversation with Henry Riley. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Good evening, you're listening to Henry Riley here on LBC. Let me just take you to Miami in Florida, where Donald Trump is currently speaking at the moment. Let's take a listen.
Money is guaranteed. They get their money back. It's a form of a loan. Nobody knows that. I know that. I said, why isn't somebody saying, we do it the same way? And we spent much more money. We have to equalize, but while the United States gets nothing back, so they get their money back. It's a loan. We just give our money. And we had a deal based on rare earth and things, but they broke that deal. But they broke it 2 days ago. We had a deal because I said, we're spending $350 billion, and Europe gets their money back in the form of a loan, and we don't. We're just giving the money hand over fist. That's the Biden administration for you. But they're no longer dealing with the same United States as they were dealing with a few months ago. Why didn't crooked Joe Biden demand equalization, and that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us, and that there's a very big, beautiful ocean, a separation? This is, we're helping Europe. We're trying to help Europe. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent them is missing. They don't know where the money is. He said, well, we don't know where half of it is. That's great, wonderful. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy, pretty easy. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast, because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably maybe he wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem, but he hasn't been able. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing. I figure Russia's lost 900,000 soldiers. I think that Ukraine's lost probably 700,000. And it's a terrible thing. You'll see bodies and body parts all over the field, all over. We see them very accurately through satellites. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died.
Well, that's Donald Trump speaking. No change, really, from what he said. If anything, he's going further, and the contempt for Volodymyr Zelensky is just radiating off of him. I mean, a lot of inaccuracies that I'm sure we can get to, but one thing that struck me, he said that President Zelensky could have been in Saudi Arabia if he wanted. Well, I don't think that was the message at all. Ukraine and Europe fundamentally not invited to these talks with Marco Rubio in Riyadh, the US Secretary of State. Let's bring into the conversation Simon Marks, who's LBC's Washington correspondent. Good to see you, Simon. It didn't take very long, but the UK newspapers full of condemnation, from The Guardian to The Express, about Donald Trump's recent comments about Zelensky.
Well, let's just be clear, Henry. Everything that Donald Trump just said, every single claim that you just heard him making down there in Miami, was a lie. They did not, the Americans, have a deal with the Ukrainians to take control of Ukraine's rare earths, those minerals, including highly valuable things like lithium and other rare earths that Donald Trump absolutely wants to get his hands on. In fact, what happened at the Munich Security Conference was that J.D. Vance, the Vice President, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, tried to strong-arm Zelensky into signing an agreement on the spot that would have given the United States the control of 50% of Ukraine's rare earths for generations to come. And Zelensky, being a canny individual, turned them down flat and said no, he wasn't going to sign any piece of paper like that. Now, to be fair, Zelensky is the first person who came up with the idea of offering the United States some access to some of Ukraine's mineral resources, but he wasn't anywhere close to having agreed a deal, as Donald Trump maintained there. Let's also be absolutely clear about President Volodymyr Zelensky's popularity within his own country. His approval rating stands at 56%, not the 4% that Donald Trump maintains. In other words, President Zelensky is far more popular in his own country than Donald Trump is here in the United States. Then there is the issue of missing money. Donald Trump saying that Volodymyr Zelensky has agreed that hundreds of millions of dollars worth of American aid has gone missing. That is a complete lie. There is no money missing. Much of the money that was voted by Congress to support Ukraine was spent here in the United States. Zelensky says he never received it. Well, he was never supposed to receive some of it, but there are analyses out there that you can look up online. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has published a very clear one here in Washington, D.C. that makes it absolutely apparent that when Donald Trump keeps repeating this claim that somehow there's been fraud and corruption within the Ukrainian government, that millions of dollars have gone missing, that is an absolute and complete falsehood. And then there's this issue of Zelensky being a dictator who has refused to hold an election. I mean, let's just remind ourselves that Donald Trump is the man who, on the day he moved into the Oval Office to begin his second term, just a month ago, brought back into the Oval Office to sit on a shelf alongside him the bust of Winston Churchill, the British wartime leader who presided over a national government. Elections were delayed and postponed for 5 years because, like Ukraine, the country was fighting for its survival in a war. So the idea that Donald Trump is standing there calling Zelensky a dictator, insisting that Zelensky needs to hold a free and fair election if he's going to get a seat around the peace table, but has absolutely nothing to say about more than a decade of unfree, unfair, fixed elections by Russian President Vladimir Putin, a man who has stifled the free press at home, murdered his political opponents, has been branded a war criminal for what took place in Ukraine and continues to take place. This is the man to whom Donald Trump is now attaching himself, and Donald Trump is the president with whom somehow Keir Starmer has to engage in a dialogue when he becomes, I think somewhat gamely, the first European leader to cross the threshold of Donald Trump's White House. We think that's going to take place here next week.
Yeah, penny for Peter Mandelson's thoughts as well, of course, who's the new UK ambassador to the US. We did right at the start of the show, Simon, go through all of those claims that Donald Trump has made and point out that, I mean, I was going to say most of them, I mean, in fact, all of them, just untrue and not even a debate around them. I mean, let's not even get started on the point that Russia wants to stop the war and that Russia's not even deploying its full military capabilities in Ukraine. I mentioned right at the start, the British newspapers are turning on Donald Trump over this, and I think there was a grace period with how he perhaps had handled the hostage situation, for example, in Gaza. But on this issue, if we focus on that, I mean, how are Republicans actually reacting to this?
Well, we've actually seen some considerable pushback over the course of the last few hours from some Republicans in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. And the first one to break cover with Donald Trump earlier today was Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, who is a bit of an up-and-coming star within the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives. And he took to social media to say that he wanted to be absolutely clear that Vladimir Putin was a violent thug and dictator. That then gave an opportunity for other Republicans to break cover and to voice similar sentiments, which will not be welcomed by President Trump down there in Florida at all. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who of course sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and is a Trump whisperer, seems to be trying to thread the needle here and is indicating that he continues to support Ukraine, has in fact spoken to Zelensky over the last few hours and may now seek to try and talk Donald Trump back from the ledge. But look, if you listen to everything Donald Trump has been saying, the thing that has really stuck in his craw is the money, right? It's the amount of money that the United States has spent arming and assisting Ukraine, and he wants Ukraine to pay that money back. Also, he wants to create détente with Russia because, as his own Secretary of State put after that extraordinary meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Riyadh, the Trump administration believes that there are business opportunities for the United States in Russia. So all of this is being seen by Trump through an entirely financial and transactional prism. This is not a man who cares at all about Ukrainian sovereignty, about the number of lives that have been lost, about Russian war crimes committed against Ukrainian citizens. This is a man who simply is acting in this, as in so many other areas of foreign policy, like a businessman. He wants to make money out of Ukraine, he wants to make money out of Russia, and that is the guiding force behind him. You know, we've always said for so many generations, haven't we, in Europe, that America always likes to go and fight wars for oil. This is a war that America hasn't fought, and yet Donald Trump is still arguing that because it has provided Ukraine with the military capacity to fight back against Russia's aggression, he's now got the right to at least 50% of the country's mineral resources.
Simon, always good to talk to you. I can see the White House in the background. I was going to say I'm very jealous because I had the privilege of spending the US election with you out in Washington. But actually, I think I'm safer here in Leicester Square. Thank you very much, Simon. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington. I mean, it's not funny, but it's just almost beyond belief. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent with the very latest.